Hey everyone, it's Millie.
It's Gabby.
And welcome back to a not so normal Change by Degrees, because we just finished recording an episode and realized that due to power difficulties, my computer cut off like 4 minutes in. So we're going to be using the camera audio. It's not going to be nearly as good, but I think the discussion should make up for that.
Yes. It's a good discussion. We don't want to re-record because it was really, really good. And so you're just going to have to deal with some questionable audio this week.
I'm screaming. So that's just a disclaimer. And you're going to hear us say, hey, Millie, hey, Gabby. And it's going to sound nothing like it sounds like right now.
And we're going to continue to talk and go on normally as if
it's
recording
wrong.
Great. And you know what's really funny is that we kept talking into these microphones
as if
they were working and recording.
I was really concerned. This is what happens when we don't record in your apartment, but that's fine. And at the end, the camera cut off like it usually does, and that's usually no problem. I wouldn't expect anything.
But that means we don't have audio at the end of our conversation.
So
it was only about I want to say 4 minutes or so.
4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So when that cuts off, we're going to try to come back in this form, as you are hearing right now, to finish and make the ending points we had.
Yes.
I love how, even though this is 80 episodes in, we still are bound to mess it up. I
don't think this has ever happened before. 81 episodes in, and I don't think this has ever happened.
Where we had to use
camera audio. I think we've done pretty good. That power surge just knocked Millie's computer
into overload,
into oblivion. So that's what we didn't notice because we were in the middle of recording.
No, and usually I have it's okay. Hopefully, so still enjoy this episode. Hopefully we get our lives together, fixed for next week.
Yep.
And we will be back when the audio for the camera cuts off, and we'll finish the episode, and we'll see you then.
Yep.
Thank you. We're sorry, everybody.
Hope you enjoy it.
God bless you. And my computer. Hey everyone, it's Millie.
It's Gabby.
And welcome back to another week of Change by Degrees. And this week we have episode 81, To Hell and Back with Hadestown. I didn't know we were going to be doing this episode this season because I tagged along last minute with the Sanfords.
We went to go see Hadestown at the Kennedy Center.
We did, and it was my first
musical. It was great.
Amazing. I loved every single second of it. And it was my first secular play I've seen, aside from college. Mad respect. But at
shout out to Mason.
Shout out to Mason's College Productions. But a legit play. And it was just completely new, but I was totally obsessed. I really wasn't sure if I would like it or not, even though Gabby was like, no, you're gonna love it.
Because I knew you would like the music, but the story in and of itself and the I don't know, the musical itself and the acting and everything. I was like, I don't know if you'll enjoy that, but I knew you'd enjoy this one because
of the
type of music it is.
Yeah.
It's super interesting to listen to. The whole band is on the stage as opposed to a lot of musicals where the orchestra is underneath the stage. You don't see them. But on this one, everyone's on stage, so you get to see them play and everything. So I was just I don't know if you're going to like the story, but at least you can, if you want, shut your eyes and just enjoy the music. I don't know. But yeah.
And it was Gabby's second time seeing Hadestown, because the first time was the last one she saw before COVID hit. And I remember distinctly her telling me about the stage and how obsessed she was.
So I remember I took a picture of it and I sent it to you, and I was like, the stage is really, really cool. And then shout out to Candace. Me and Candace were sitting in the theater. Hadestown's at a really small theater. I think it's the Walter Kerr Theater on Broadway, and it's one of the older theaters.
So it was smaller than what we went to?
100%.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Whereas this one at the Kennedy Center, we were in, I don't know what theater, with the Opera House Theater or something.
Yeah.
It has the floor and then for seating, and then it has box seats, and then it has 3 tiers. Whereas the Walter Kerr is so tiny, it has the floor and then 1 tier.
Oh, that's it.
That's it.
Oh, wow.
So even if me and Candace were sitting toward the back on the tier, we still were it felt like we were on top of the stage, and we had a really great view, similar to what we had, except we were just so much closer.
Right, I see.
It was so small of a theater, but yeah, we were sitting right in front of the soundboard and stuff, or soundboards, because I had multiple. So that was really cool. I could turn around. There was only a few rows behind me and be like, oh, there's a soundboard right there and all the sound people. So that was really cool. But yeah, so this was definitely a bigger theater, so it was kind of different in that regard, but otherwise everything else was pretty much.
And the stage was a little bit different.
Yeah, it was a little bit different, just because when you have a Broadway musical in a theater for a few years, you can alter the stage however you want.
Right.
But they're, what we saw at the Kennedy Center was the national tour. So they're touring. They're only at the Kennedy Center, I think, for like 10 days or so.
Mm.
And so you can only alter a theater that you're borrowing for so much. Right. Yeah, so much. So, yeah, some aspects of it there was only like maybe like one thing that I noticed that was different. And that was like the middle part of the stage, instead of going like up and down like an elevator, back and forth to like Hell or Hadestown or whatever, the Kennedy Center stage can't do that. So they had like a elevator type thing on the side.
Right, that's the side would like lift up.
That would lift up and then go. And so, but it was still effective. And I thought that was pretty cool the way they did that. But yeah, so that was the only like difference I saw on like the stage.
Actually, I didn't ask this, but I'm curious, like actor wise, like, because of course, after I saw the play, then I'm like, but I want to listen to this music again. Yeah. And so I listened to the original cast recordings.
The cast album is so good. And those are the people that I saw, because it was still the original Broadway cast when I went to go see it. So the people on the cast album is the people that I saw. Even Nobelzada and Reeve Carney and Andre de Shields. Although I didn't get to see Andre de Shields when I went as Hermes, because I think it was his day off. So they had the understudy who was equally as good. I don't remember his name. And Amber Gray played Persephone, and Patrick Page. I thought of something actually that was really interesting. When I got home and I was thinking, I was like, I don't remember who played Hades in the national tour that we saw.
Right.
I don't remember his name. I don't know the national tour that well. But he was very, very good.
Yes.
Very, very good. But it's funny because Patrick Page, who plays Hades in the original Broadway cast, after I was listening to it, I was like, I think Patrick Page, you don't have to listen to it, definitely sang an octave or two lower.
Really?
Like, that role was like, I was like, no one else can get that low. No one else can hit those notes. Like, the role was like literally like written for him.
I'm screaming.
So, or at least it seems that way, because I was like, no one else.
And that's so funny, because in my perspective, I'm like, he was the lowest singer on the stage already.
You'll have to listen to Patrick Page, because it was, like, when he sings Hey Little Songbird, it's like an octave
I didn't
lower.
hear him sing it. And of course the epics, which I love.
Yeah.
When he speaks, his voice was really low, but I didn't hear him singing it on the album, so I'm really curious to hear back. So I'm it's already so low.
It's very low. Like, especially, it was so funny because, like, listening to this guy on Saturday, he obviously, you're right, like, very low.
Already.
And then, but it was funny because when I saw Patrick Page on Broadway, like, the cast album, obviously, you sing as you say, like, you sing it's low. But hearing it live, I was like, holy crap. And you can tell, like, the collective, the whole audience. And most people there had probably listened to the cast album, like, they know his voice. But, like, that first note he sings in Hey Little Songbird, it was so low. It was like the mutual understanding of the audience being like, ooh, that's so low. Like, but it's so good. But you'll have to listen to it, because I swear, I'm like, I don't know.
Lower.
He had to have, like, sang an octave lower, too. Like, it's so low. Like, and I don't think the man on Saturday sang that low. Maybe you couldn't get down there. I don't know. But it was still really brilliant. I really liked how I think everyone in the national tour, I really enjoy seeing shows twice with different casts to see how like other actors and actresses like interpret the songs and their characters and stuff. So that was really cool, seeing just like a different perspective, because like even though it's the quote unquote same show, they just interpret different things differently.
Yeah,
and like
in the end, you probably get a totally different experience. Yeah, it might be the same show, but a different experience.
Yeah, completely. So that was really cool. So I never turned down seeing the show twice or three times. I saw Les Miserables. Like, I think I saw Les Mis. I think I only saw it twice, but still, that's a little special. I love Les Mis, but I've seen Phantom a few times. Like, yeah. So I never turn down seeing the show more than once. I think it's fun.
I know, and I would definitely see this one again. My impression, I don't know. I walked in and I was already like cracking up at how like fancy the place seems.
The Kennedy
Center. The chandeliers. Like there's just so many things to unpack, and I think for the first half of the play, I was just trying to like grasp the story and what was going on, because there was so much. I should have like done a little bit of research beforehand, but I wanted everything to be like fresh and new. But once you get into the story, I'm like, there's so many deep nuances and. It's amazing how in the span of like 3 hours, I don't know how long the play was, like that you still have character development, you laugh like bawling my eyes out, and I was like, okay, I didn't expect to be doing this, but and then listening back to the cast recording, I'm already kind of like, oh, I like what I heard more. They're both fantastic, but I'm just like, I'm already so connected to the live version, how the characters interpreted it, and like even the spacing between a character singing something, and then Hades interjected and being like, "Oh, the song's about me,"
Mm-hmm.
and it was completely different. I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh," and the thing is, I realized that what was missing in the cast recording, not missing, but like what I got live is that the audience was like cracking up at certain lines, and they leave a little bit more space because it's live, and the musicians have to kind of go off what the audience is giving them, and the characters too. Like when Hermes is cracking jokes at the beginning, like I'm sure all that's completely different.
Yeah.
Imagine with a dry crowd, I would like want to quit.
Yeah.
But
Well, it was interesting seeing like audience reactions for, and not that I remember all those details when I saw it like 2 years ago, but the audience reactions with New York versus Kennedy Center. But it's funny because obviously right now, because we're still in COVID, Kennedy Center wasn't, usually they have like drinks you can buy, they have a bar in the back that you can get drinks from. But when I went before COVID in New York, that stuff was all open. So people were getting like champagne or wine or a beer or whatever. And it was really funny because at the part where, also any spoilers, sorry, but at the part where
you raise
a glass, they raised it to the audience and everyone was able to raise it back, which was really cool. So it was very like breaking the fourth wall kind of thing. And it was just like you saw like the whole audience like raise their glass to the people on stage as they raised the glass to us, and it was really very interactive. Whereas like obviously at Kennedy Center we couldn't do that because we didn't have anything in our hands. But that was cool because I think I was drinking like champagne or something, and I was like, I'm part of this. So that was really cool. But yeah, they definitely break the fourth wall in other ways too. But it was just really cool to see the audience interaction that way. Because a lot of musicals don't do that. They keep that fourth wall very solid. But Hadestown, even at the beginning when Hermes first walks out, he's talking to the audience because the whole thing of Hadestown is he is telling a story, and he's kind of saying like throughout the whole thing, all the characters are like, and this is what happened next. Not that they say that explicitly, but that's the attitude. Right. So though they're acting it out, you're there to hear their story, which is really cool too, because like you don't get that with like
other plays.
It's just like it's happening in real time, whereas this is more like, hey, this is a tale. Well, if that's the first song, this is a tale from long ago, and we're going to tell it to you. So like the whole concept to me is like really, really cool. Yeah, you always get that.
And I mean, again, I can't speak from personal experience, but it would appear to be so, because I would say that the intro and even how they ended it, it's very kind of not a singular occurrence, like event.
Right.
They set it up in a way where like, okay, I can watch it again.
Yeah.
And you're always hoping for something. And I think that's really a unique take on it, that it's not just like, okay, start, finish, that's it. That's all you have. It's kind of, and we were even talking in the car afterwards, like how the story would continue, or could it be different, or...
It's funny because my dad, he was like, oh my God, I wanted it to end differently and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, maybe. I was like, because the last song is about like, this is how it ends, but we're going to sing it again, hoping that it might end differently. And I was like, maybe if you go back and see it every single time, time it might end differently. But and that's so interesting too, because like, it won't, for two reasons. One, because they're already telling a story that already happened, right, quote unquote. And two, on a technical level, it's a musical that's written, so it's not going to change. Right. But you just, you hope that like, maybe it will.
Maybe for some, like, maybe Orpheus will be like,
maybe Orpheus won't turn around and once again spoilers and see Eurydice, and she gets sent back to Hadestown for all eternity. But yeah, you hope that doesn't happen. But at the same time, you're like, I know it does. But just keeping that hope alive, I think, is the point. And like, kind of connects back to something that when I first listened to the cast album, it gave me like chills. And they do make a very explicit point, I think, of pausing when Orpheus says it, when Persephone comes back up and and they're singing living up on top, and they're like, okay, Orpheus, you do the toast, and so he says something blah blah blah, and then he says to the world we dream about and the world we live in now, right? And I was like, yes, like, because there's that hope alive still, but you're still looking forward to what could be, but that the world we live in now is not that. And so that's also, I think, a really strong like narrative point throughout the whole musical. It's just like, we're hoping for a better day, but for right now we live here.
This is what you got.
Yeah.
So good.
It's really
so
good.
good. Like your dad being so, I was also equally disappointed, and I was really surprised that, in a way, I mean, I love Orpheus and Eurydice, like stand them forever, but I really grew to enjoy the character of Hades.
I really like Hades too.
And I think that the epic, like Orpheus talking about Hades and his past, is what makes you fall in love with Hades.
Yeah,
just so
what makes
funny.
him so sympathetic. You're like, oh, he's trying so hard,
right,
to be a good, like a lover, a good boss, a good whatever,
and provider, and all those things. And I also thought that was such an interesting narrative between when you compare the two couples. And at the end of the day, like, did either of them win?
I mean, I guess you could argue that Hades and Persephone are now on good terms, and Persephone is able to bring fall and spring back, so it's not just like scorching heat and she leaves all of a sudden, and now it's like winter. I guess that's a good thing that came out of it. But in terms of like Orpheus and Eurydice, it's kind of like, Eurydice, and they even said like, Orpheus, wherever he is now, I hope he's doing okay. Like, so
the fact that like once that happens, then he turns around and then he just walks off the stage, and I was really in my mind, I'm like, oh wait, is the worst part 2?
I know you were like, okay, so Act 3, come on in, like I
really was expecting the whole thing, and that
it ends very abruptly.
And I was just like, and then they're like, okay, well, here we go.
Yeah, and Hermes is like, all right.
And I'm like, wait, false.
That's it.
That can't be.
Yeah.
It was just so sudden, and you're so invested in the story, and you really think, and we even talked about this, like, afterwards, like, Orpheus is a character that is just so positive and will believe in the power of love, and
he gets
trust.
screwed over. So what does that tell?
Yeah, it's like,
what do you? But what is that? Like, it's just, it begs so many questions of like, what do you get when you're hopeful? What do you get out of being hopeful for like a new tomorrow, or like, I don't know. It's just,
and I think, and I like that, because
kind of cynical, but
a little cynical, but I think because as humans, we're really invested in a love story that like they end up together, because the power of love or positivity prevails over all, and like with Orpheus, you completely believe that narrative from the beginning, that like, oh, at the end he's going to be so trusting of Eurydice and their love, and he's going to make it. That it's almost like it's such a shock, because you're like, what does this even mean? Like, what's the point of the story? And then you realize, oh, well, maybe that isn't so.
Yeah, that's just kind of like, okay, well, and that's, I think, kind of going back to like the whole circular kind of narrative that they do, is that like, well, he looked back and he didn't trust Eurydice, and so Orpheus he turned around and looked at her, and she has to go back to Hadestown forever. But maybe if we sing the song again, maybe he won't look. Maybe they will make it out, both of them, or whatever.
And that was, I think, like visually one of the most impressive parts of the play, when he's trying to make his way back from Hadestown, because it's like pitch black. And then, we said that, and also when they have, I don't know if they were like chandeliers or like lanterns, and they're throwing them, and I'd be like, I'm gonna be knocked out,
messed that up,
like so fast. I don't know if like whenever they have them hanging off of is helping where they're going, because I'm like,
and you can watch what we're talking about. They did perform, not this cast, but the Broadway cast performed it at the Tonys in 2019. I think so, which is on YouTube, and it's so they perform, so you can see what we're talking about when they have like and they do a kind of a modified version because it's the Tonys and they only have so much time. But the song is "Wait for Me," and they performed that in 2019. But yeah, they swing these like huge lamp things, and it's so much coordination.
Somebody's getting knocked out. Imagine.
And plus, with the stage turning, like they have 2 circles, and one circle turns one way, and the other circle turns the other way, and so I just would have like fallen 600 times.
The thing is, I would have fallen, but not before I knocked somebody else out.
You would, I would have taken down somebody else, another
Orpheus,
dancer.
just boom.
Yeah, Orpheus is down, so
he got knocked out. But that was really impressive to me, just the coordination.
Yes, 100%.
Because it's also pitch black and there's smoke.
Yeah, they have
like
smoke
you're singing
on the ground, and you're singing, and you're trying to dance, and you're trying to stay on beat, and you're trying to do like you're blocking correctly, and like blocking on the stage of where you're supposed to be when. I would have
astounding. And then it was just so impressive, because I feel like a lot of times in these plays you rely a lot on the set to get you
Mm-hmm.
in the right mindset and like with the characters. But here's like again, it's mostly black. You have a little light on Orpheus, and he's like trying to walk on the little ring that's moving on stage, and you have like the muses.
The muses were
The
awesome.
muses, like their harmonies.
That's like everybody's favorite.
Okay. I'll be the typical person because also the song I
for
love
good
the most.
reason, though.
In Act 1 when the
chips
are down. Also my favorite song.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Other than the epics. But yeah, like just watching that and I'm like, wow, there really isn't, you're not seeing all the buildings
Mm-mm.
or the band. You're literally seeing Orpheus walking like a pit of darkness. But I'm like, this is so impressive.
Which is like, well, it's beautiful too, like just like the smoke and the dark. That's one of my favorite, like, throughout the show you have really, really bright lights and you have different colors.
A bunch
and
of colors.
the stage moves and blah, blah, blah. But this, yeah, it's just, and of course the band is on stage, so you see everybody playing and blah, blah, blah. But like, yeah, when he's coming back from Hadestown, just trusting that Eurydice is following but not really knowing, then, I mean, it's just like, it creates this feeling of loneliness so well. And like the only thing that, is playing when he's first starting the song, Doubt Comes In when he's walking by himself, is the kick drum that we talked about, who isn't even on stage. He's not even on the stage, or he's behind somebody else or something. So you don't even see him playing, like, or her. And so, and the kick drum is just like keeping this really steady beat, almost like a heartbeat. And it's just like kind of like gray and black and foggy, and Orpheus is walking by himself. And in previous songs, he sings like his song that he's working on to bring the world back into tune, and people respond or people echo it. But in this, he sings it and no one responds.
Right.
And so it just creates like this whole feeling of just like loneliness and dread that he's singing and no one's echoing it. And because that's how he got into Hadestown in the first place. He sings and the walls echoed it and opened for him, so he could get in. But now the walls aren't responding. He's really alone. It's just so like, on a narrative level, it's so brilliant.
Yes.
But it is very...
And the downward spiral, like just
and that's what he's saying, like this doubt that comes in, and the muses obviously aren't helping. The only other people say are the muses.
Yes. And they're like, that's coming in. Yeah. Isn't it, Orpheus?
And so he's by himself, and he's just, thinking about it, mulling over it, just being like, this is a trap, she's not behind me, blah, blah, blah. And the whole time, he's kind of alone in the first part of the song, but then later, Eurydice is singing to him, but he can't hear her because she's too far behind him or whatever. And so she's singing like, I'm right here, I'm not leaving, I'm with you, but it's too late, and he turns around before she can get out. But yeah, that was like I think visually that's my favorite, that's probably my favorite like point in the musical, because it just visually is so beautiful. And so like it makes you like your heart being like, oh my god, like is he gonna make it? He doesn't, but or like he makes it, but Eurydice doesn't.
Your dad definitely.
Yeah, everyone who isn't familiar with the play is like, all right, she's gonna make it out, and I'm just like,
I really thought
she doesn't.
And I was like, wait, what? And your mom did. I heard your mom. He turned back, didn't he? And I was like, yes.
My mom's like, dang it.
But and I also something that I really enjoyed about the whole experience is that everyone picked up on different things. So like your dad was picking up a lot on color, and so did you. And then I was trying to explain to Gabby, I'm like, this makes no sense. I was like, the Orpheus, he sings, God bless this man's vocal cords, but he's like all the way up there in the sky, like falsetto, so pretty, such a clean tone, so airy and light. And it's for the epic about Hades, which is all the way down in like hell. So I'm just like the musical opposite of what you're actually singing about, which was so interesting to me, along with how they used color. And I'm like, you can probably pick up on so much. And like, whoever thought about this didn't miss a single thing. Like, it was all done so intentionally. And yeah, I just love the epics. So
the epics are beautiful.
And the fact with his electric guitar.
Yeah,
and I was just like, I was like, wait, is he actually going to do this? Is this what the play is?
That's his quote unquote lyre.
And it's just, I was cracking up because it was so pretty. And the fact that it was just like, good music is like 2 chords and like him singing all the way up in the clouds.
When I first heard, because I listened to the cast album before I went to go see the musical, I started listening to the cast album. I think as soon as it came out, I don't know why, I was just like, oh, a new musical's coming out, and they'll release the cast album, I'll listen to it. And I listened to, all of it all the way through, because that's like, I don't just pick songs that sound or the titles. I'm saying, like, I want to listen to the whole story.
Experience.
Yeah. And so I think it was Epic 3. When I first heard it, I definitely bawled. I was like, I don't even know what's going on because I didn't have the visual.
Right.
Like, I didn't have the visual or
You're just
anything,
like-
but I was just like, this is so like beautiful in the story and
Mhm.
everything, and how Orpheus is singing to Hades, like, you know, this is you, this is about you,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And obviously, like, on the cast album, Reeve Carney's voice is like perfection. It's so beautiful, and once again, I'm not familiar with the national touring cast, but the man who plays Orpheus in the national tour right now, his voice is equally as
he did phenomenal.
gorgeous, like so good. And but yeah, that like high singing is just so pretty, and then the story itself. But yeah, I don't know about all the people who were in charge of, like, because you know I have people behind the scenes. Obviously,
Right.
we know about like production and who
Mhm.
chose the lighting and who chose this. But the woman who wrote the musical, I believe I might pronounce her name wrong, but her name is Anais, I believe, Anais Mitchell. If I'm pronouncing Anais wrong, sorry. But she wrote Hadestown and all the music and all the lyrics for it, and it's just so crazy that I'm like, every time I watch an interview with her or whatever, or she's sang a few of these songs before, but every time it's just so interesting to be like, this
Your
woman,
brain
this
is,
little
like,
woman just wrote
astonishing.
this musical and was just like, yeah, I wrote Hadestown. Like, how can you say that like so casually? You're just being like, I'm gonna sing a song from Hadestown now. Oh, which I wrote. Like, and she's just like, this woman. She's had a baby a few months ago. Like, she's just a normal chick, and I'm just like, dude, like, you're a genius. Like, all these lyrics, all the, like, you know, I'm sure it took her years to do,
Yeah.
but still, like, it's
But
wild.
just like true art.
Mhm.
Like, there's not one part where I'm like, yeah, this could have been better, didn't affect. Like, no, just excellence everywhere. Like, I love that music, and you're right. And I think it had so much energy.
Mhm.
Like the set and the dancing,
Mhm.
which again I don't know crap about. Gabby can attest more to that. But I absolutely loved just like the amount of energy. Even for
Yeah.
example, like the wedding song.
I love
Like the wedding song
Yeah.
is so pretty,
Mhm.
and it just was like nothing like what I was expecting for some reason. I don't know what I was
Yeah, I
expecting.
think that's what's fun too, is that you go in thinking it's going to be one way, and then it's either better than you expected or just completely different.
Mhm.
And yeah, I don't think there's like any musical that I've ever seen that I was like walked away kind of like, oh well, when I listened to the cast album, I expected better. Like, they always exceed my expectations, of course. Like, I mean, come
And I
on,
think it's
but-
completely different to how what we think in a musical. Well, we talked about Disney Cinderella,
I don't
but
know.
in general, we think as a movie musical is still completely different than what you get in a theater musical. Like
Yeah, 100%. Like, it's just, that's what's so wild. It's like,
the story, you're gonna miss everything if you don't listen to the music.
yeah,
Like you're gonna get
Like,
so lost in the sauce.
if you just go in completely blind, I can understand how you'd be confused. It might take a minute to like catch on because you have to listen to the lyrics
Mhm.
because that's what's explaining the story. But when you go back and listen to the cast album, you pick up on
So
so many
much.
different things. Even now, if I go back and listen to the cast album straight through, which I haven't done in a really long time, but if I listened to it straight through, I'm sure I pick up on other stuff in the lyrics or
Mm.
different symbolisms or whatever. Like, I picked up on something the other day that was really interesting. But I didn't listen to the cast album all the way through, but I have a Broadway playlist on Spotify, and so I picked out, you know, my favorite songs from all the musicals I have listened to, and I just put them on there. But I think it's an Epic 1, or maybe before Epic 1. I don't remember what song it is, but it was on my playlist, and I was just listening to it, and it was interesting to hear because, and it's just little things like this that make a difference. That Hermes is talking about Orpheus. He's introducing Orpheus, and he's saying like, I took one underneath my wing. His mother was a friend of mine, blah, 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 and that's why he's, quote unquote, looking out for Orpheus or whatever.
Right.
And then at the end of the musical, I think in kind of like the reprise of when Orpheus looks back and turns around and Hermes kind of closes up the story, he says, instead of saying like, his mother was a friend of mine, he says, I learned that from a friend of mine, and he's talking about Orpheus. So it kind of goes from like him being like, oh, this kid I look after, to he was a really good friend, and he taught us to be able to look at the world a different way. And I learned that from him, and I was just like, I didn't realize that before, that he like kind of changes the
way he references.
yeah, the way he references Orpheus. And so I was just like, oh, that's really good. Like, and once again, I've listened to this musical several times, but I didn't pick up on that
But
because
the
I
moment
just,
you're just like so shook at
Yeah.
everything that's happening that you tend
for
to
some
miss
reason,
things.
you just
But-
miss things, and then you listen to a song again, and you're like, oh, I really like that, or whatever. But and everything's just so detailed, like, and everything connects to everything else, and like nothing, no lyric is like haphazardly thrown in there.
Right.
Everything is so intentional, and that's what also makes it really fun to listen to and fun to watch.
Right, it just gives it re-listenability.
Yeah,
if that's even a word.
Like, you don't even get the gist in the first time listening to it.
Like I said, at the end of Act 1, I was like, okay. All I could say after Act 1 is like, when the chips are down.
I like that one.
I like that one. And then Act 2, it kind of like slows down and you're really in the struggle. Like you're approaching the pinnacle where everything's going to fall apart. And then you start just reviewing things more and more. And then listening to the album afterwards, you're just like, oh, I remember what character said what and when this was happening. And I'm like, I get it's so much more.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, it was like, it's just so good. Like, I never get tired. That's one musical that is always, like, fresh. Like, some musicals, you're like, oh, I've heard this song 3,000 times.
Right.
But that one's always, like...
Well, no, because I think, and I think that's a really good point, because like I said, with musicals, you think the songs are, well, they're not traditional like verse, chorus, and you have repeated sections, but I think this one in particular is a phenomenal job at storytelling. Like, even if he repeats a certain group or a chorus, even though we don't really call it that, it still sounds different. We still take the melody a little bit differently in this take of the line, or this other person joins in. Like, nothing sounds exactly the same the next time you hear it. There's something taken away, something added, and it seems very lived in, like in a genuine way. I feel like sometimes listen to a musical, I'm like, oh, that seems really forced. But here it seems a little bit more nuanced and natural with how the characters like interact with each other or speak something in between lines, and it just seems like it's and we talked about this also at Mason, for certain performances, like you're never going to get that specific performance again. Right, yeah. It's just like a singular moment in time.
Which I think speaks to like the looseness also of like this musical is, and I think that's also represented in the dancing. It's choreographed, obviously, but the choreography is made to look like it's not choreographed. It's just made to look like everyone's having a good time and everyone's, kind of doing their own thing. But it is very planned out, I'm sure, behind the scenes. But, they don't want to make it look like that. They don't want to make it look like planned out. They want to make it look like everyone's kind of doing something different, but it's still cohesive and it's kind of like free and blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of just throwing your body around as opposed to being very deliberate with every single movement. So I think the story does the same thing. And because, obviously, when we go see a musical, we know there's going to be a story. But because Hadestown is so explicit in that it is a story, like the musical tells you it's a story that they're telling you in real time. And it's not, the story that they're telling isn't, quote unquote, happening in real time. It's like, oh, this happened a really long time ago and we're going to retell it to you now. Yeah. I think that also speaks to, like, there's no possible way that the songs and lyrics could be so structured, because every time you tell a story, it's slightly different. Like, especially with, like, this is coming from a Greek background, Greek mythology, the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, which is obviously different than what Hadestown is, but same characters, same concept of Eurydice she went to hell, but anyway, different reason. Orpheus tried to get back, he can't. So same thing, but like, it's just interesting how, like, there's no possible way that you could make it such a structured narrative and still get the same feeling and emotion from it, because it's not based off of a structured narrative. It's based off of Greek mythology, which is never structured, because one book might say this happened in a myth, and another book might say, yeah, that was kind of like that, but not really. It's slightly different. Like, so I just think, it's just, I think, I don't know, the people who produced this whole musical really took, at least it seems like they really took that into account.
Yeah, and I would say so, because like I said, I thought a lot of things when I heard musical, and I knew the musical would be good, but just the way it went about being a musical was also really unique, I would say. Yeah. And I think you're right that them saying it's a retelling of a story gives you that freedom. Even in the instrumentation and how the characters interact with one another, it's almost like, oh, they're just kind of like putting this little show on. Yeah. Even though, it in the sense of like just how they're going about it.
Like, we got these people together who know what happened in the story, and we're going to tell it to you now.
And they're doing a really good job. Yeah. Off the cuff. Yeah, that's what it is. And it's just, it makes it so engaging, I would think. And just,
especially since, like, even they even make it like that in the very first like 4 seconds of the musical, because usually with music, not usually, but with a lot of musicals, it'll, they'll dim the lights and bring the lights down, and then everyone kind of like is quiet, and the audience are like, oh, the show's starting, and you wait for the curtain to open or something happen.
Right.
These people, they didn't really lower the lights. They just kind of walked onto the stage, and everyone was like, "Oh, are they starting? What's happening?" Like, and so all the characters just come in and sit down.
We see. I wouldn't know that.
Yeah.
But even just as the first time there, I'm like, "Oh, it's starting, Gabby."
Oh my gosh.
We might get
Lights almost went out. Really good.
But just sitting there and
Yeah.
having Hermes go out and like talking, and I'm like, "Is this like a pre-show thing?"
Oh,
like,
they're starting.
no, they're starting.
Yeah. So it's almost kind of like, just in the same vein of someone. It just reminds me of like old timey times of like we're all sitting around the campfire. Hey, did I ever tell you the story of Orpheus and Eurydice? Well, let me tell it to you. Like just
like
very
if someone
abrupt.
were gonna read a story.
Yeah, it's like the characters or the people saw that they had an audience. Oh crap, let's go tell them this really cool story. Like it's just very informal, and I just really love how that all occurred. But yeah, so good.
It was phenomenal. I have to go to every single one now.
Now you have to go to every musical.
I'm like totally into it. I'm a believer. I will say that if you ever go to the theater with me, no disrespect will be shown, because at the end of the show, you're clapping and the band is still playing and half the people are leaving.
That's
and I was
very
like,
annoying.
who are you? What? Why?
Like we're in the middle of giving a standing
taken-
ovation, and these people are like, "But I have to go to the bathroom." I'm like, "You can wait for 3 more seconds."
And I'm like, I knew it was a matinee, but I'm like, you have all the time in the world.
Yeah.
Like, appreciate that these people did such a magnificent job. I'm just like, I don't understand that. But that's
like
fine.
I'm not leaving
I'm
until they
glad.
start to walk off the stage. Like I'm gonna continue to clap.
But
yeah.
so good. Like Persephone is such a fun character. Like I think there's gonna be one character in the show you're bound to relate to, whether it's Hades' perspectives. You know the Hades in your life. You know the Orpheus
Yeah, you're
in
like,
your life.
yeah, that's blah,
Or
blah,
the
blah.
you know the Eurydice. And I told even again like her voice. I thought each of the voices were so unique and such an integral part of their character. Like Eurydice, she has such a piercing, clear tone that represents her character so well. Like when she's talking to Orpheus, and just how she's talking about how she sees the world and how it's a cruel, hard place, and she had this perspective, and the way the tone of her voice just represented that.
Yeah.
Orpheus, you could tell he was like in dreamland, where he's just like, this is how I see the world, and Hades surprisingly cracks you up, and he has such a low voice, but he tries to crack these jokes here and there. And Persephone, I'm just like, my favorite character changes every day. Where I'm just like, Persephone's just a fun alcoholic who's just like living it up, and so carefree. And I'm just like,
it's just
the characters are so likable.
Yeah.
They're not perfect.
No,
they're so
they're not.
human.
I
You can relate to some aspect of each of them.
I think that's what's also fun. I have a really, really soft spot in any book, TV show, movie, play, musical for morally gray characters. So I really, really love.
She likes the bad guys.
Not even that. Just like,
She's like
that. Just kind of like I just really enjoy dissecting morally gray characters. There's the good. You like having your righteous or your completely evil people, but like I just really like those people in between who aren't really sure about what's happening. But because sometimes even like the righteous characters can be really boring. Like in Les Miserables, not to bring back to Les Miserables, but like the most like the pinnacle character in the story is Cosette, but she's kind of the most boring. She doesn't have a personality. Her sole purpose is to be the redeeming factor for the main character. So it's just kind of like she doesn't have much substance.
Right.
So I really like those characters. Like Hades, you might think he's the villain at first and he's completely wrong, evil, but then you kind of start to listen to him, or you start to listen to Orpheus's tale about him, and you're like, like he's kind of sympathetic, like,
and how you got to be there, like young versus old, and understanding their perspective. And again, I think that was so interesting that you really at the beginning don't get to know Hades through Hades. You get to know Hades through Orpheus, and not even through Hades right now. You get that more in Act 2, but like your introduction is like a young Hades, and when you hear Orpheus talk about him, you're like, oh, I think he's going to be like this. And then this man comes out the cut. He's like, talking to Eurydice on behind closed doors. And your dad was cracking me up at that scene. He was like, you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And it was just...
It's just really interesting how, you don't really meet Hades until like the very end of Act 1. And the whole time... You hear about him from, like you said, from Orpheus. You hear about him from Persephone. You You hear about him from Hermes. Eurydice doesn't really, whatever, she doesn't really know. But
she gets to know.
She gets to know him, but Eurydice doesn't really experience him until, the end of Act 1. But yes, but you don't really meet him until the end of Act 1 and actually get like a feel for him. But that's really interesting. I just really love like the whole narrative, and like there's so many similarities between it and I don't know, just like our world in general, which obviously is on purpose. But yeah, I also really love, there was one song the Muses sang after Eurydice makes her deal with Hades, but I don't remember what song it is, but they go down and it's kind of like that the Muses are once again breaking like the fourth wall and like talking to the crowd and just kind of saying like, you can judge all you want for her decision to leave Orpheus and go with Hades, but wouldn't you do the same thing if you were in her position?
Oh, yeah.
And so it was very interesting that because it's so funny that like that, because the audience or the Muses, quote unquote, know that the audience is like, why'd she do that? And the Muses address like, okay, yeah, you can judge all you want, but when you're hungry, no amount of love is going to help, or no amount of whatever is going to help, or well wishes. Like,
which I'm just like, that's such a real characteristic.
Yeah.
And the fact that they called that out, and I'm like, no, I'm like with Eurydice, don't worry. Don't worry, Muses. Like, I'm following along with her thought process here. And I just think, again, such a completely different take on like bringing reality and real problems. Like I said, it's not like your typical love story.
No, it's not.
It's just kind of like, okay, well, I've been waiting for you, and you're like writing the song for months and months and months, and
that's
it's happening.
That's not
going
to
to,
anything.
it's not going to like fill my belly at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think that's really, I don't know. I just thought it's such a like simple concept, but when you actually think about it, it's like really relevant to I think our world now, and I don't know. I really like it, and I also think it's once again, I'm not trying to bring Les Mis into every single thing.
It's okay.
But
it's okay.
if you know Les Mis,
we have a space for this here.
This is a space, okay? This is an episode about musicals, so I get to talk about Les Miserables. I'll never bring it up again, I promise. But it is very similar to Les Miserables in the sense of both the book and the musical, because the way Victor Hugo, who wrote the book, like he saw his whole argument with writing Les Miserables was to kind of prove that poverty breeds sin, or poverty is a factor in why people make really poor decisions or really bad decisions or decisions that affect other people or whatever. And so in the same vein, it's kind of how Hadestown, Eurydice, she makes choices that aren't super great, but she's hungry. Like, so it's kind of the same, very parallel to each other, is that, a lot of times social issues, it's like, well, we have these issues because of poverty, or we have these, like, yeah, dude, I wasn't going to go sell my soul to Hades, but I'm really hungry right now, and I don't have anything else.
I don't want to survive. And this is where we're at.
Yeah, and like in Les Miserables, Jean Valjean is like, yeah, dude, I just spent, I think it's like 20 years in prison for stealing bread, but I stole it because I was hungry and I was trying to take care of my sister and her kids. Like,
so am I really
the bad guy here? And so I think
speaks towards society.
Yeah, it's just very parallel in how they deal with issues, and it's really funny that Les Miserables was written in 1860s and Hadestown was written in,
and here we are, the same place.
But it's just so similar. Like,
narrative.
Fantine turns to prostitution because she's trying to feed her kid. And then
Eurydice is like selling her soul to Hades
because she's trying to feed herself. It's Orpheus.
Different levels, but it's the same thing.
It's just so interesting how parallel it is, and but anyway, all that to say.
Well, I think the lesson here is that the arts never pay. Orpheus couldn't provide for Eurydice.
She did not go.
Being a musician doesn't pay. Writing doesn't pay.
Yeah.
So as a lesson to me and Gabby, obviously we might be poor. But that's okay, I guess.
And
we might steal some bread.
And that's really funny because Hades even like says that.
He does, and that's what I'm saying. When I was like realizing, because I had to catch up, I went so slow. But I was like, wait, Hades is like, I provide for you, Persephone. What do you mean about our love? He's like, have you ever wanted for anything? I do all these things and have these like people that have like sold their souls to me, but you're not hungry.
Yeah,
that's real love.
And he tells Eurydice when he's trying to get her to like make a deal with him. He's like, that poet, when you're hungry, he gives you what?
Sweet words.
A poem to eat.
To
like,
fill your belly.
And I'm just like, you know what? I don't need to be called out this way.
She really got attacked.
But the arts really got attacked,
That was
which is really funny.
It's also a narrative
in a
on like the
theater.
arts.
Yeah. So, but yes. Anyway, fantastic musical. Go listen to the cast album. Just
And apparently listen to Les Mis.
listen.
You
Okay,
have to.
folks, listen to
I
listen to it. It's a classic. Classic.
loves
One
it
of the
so
longest running Broadway musicals behind Phantom. I think it's the third.
And wait, actually, at the
longest.
Kennedy Center, because they have photos of all the plays.
Yeah, like all the
and
plays
she's like,
and
that's
musicals.
Les Mis.
We were walking down the stairs and I was like, "That's Les Miserables." I recognize that scene, and but it was definitely like the 1980s something
Yes,
version.
it looked,
I can tell.
really old. And
Yeah.
I now want to see Phantom of the Opera because Gabby said that they felt like a chandelier.
Oh
And
yes,
she-
because
I
the
really wanna get
chandelier
a
falls. Because
felt
the
it.
Phantom, cuts the chandelier.
So I'm really like
Yeah.
invested.
Phantom of the Opera was really brilliant. Completely different to Hadestown. Super structured. Super. Obviously, it's an opera, so operatic and
Yeah.
the singing.
A whole different world.
Oh, it's a whole completely. It's probably completely opposite to Hadestown, but it's still really, really magnificent. The stage is 10 times more complicated. The costumes are like stepping back in time. Like it's just so cool. But yeah, completely opposite to Hadestown, but still a really great musical, obviously.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear the difference in music because another thing. Sorry, talking about music, I'm like they have actual pieces, but then like just the scoring. I forget what scene it was, but it sounded like the violins were going to break their strings and like the world was about to fall apart. And I'm like, it was completely textural, and I'm like, these musicians probably have like so much.
Oh, I think that
feedback
was on. Was it on His Kiss the Riot at the very end when Hades is like trying to think of how to let Eurydice and Orpheus go?
Yes.
It's like this like crescendo,
Right.
and all the strings are going
Like
crazy.
like the
Yeah.
cello and violin is like deep and super like not pretty sounding,
Kind of
but
like
it was
piercing, screeching,
screeching, and I was just like, okay, this isn't even a piece. It's just like
like chaos.
chaos, and the musicians are
Yeah.
still able to like emulate that. And I was like, you're getting like your cinema, like your score of the film or the play. You're getting the actual pieces, the singing. I'm just like the band itself is a character, I would say, and
I love.
it was like so
strings,
cool.
So like all of that, I'm like.
Because I know you love the
I
violin
love
and
violin.
and
That's
the
also
wedding
why I
song.
really like the wedding song, the violin, and then
And the
when they
acoustic.
sing "All I've Ever Known," and then with the end, when the end of like "All I've Ever Known is how to hold my own," and then like they have that moment where like Orpheus and Eurydice are like dancing together, and it just has violin. I love that. I was like, oh, that's just enough to make me tear up. Like I love violin so much, but yeah,
It's just the type of instrumentation was so unique. Like you have drums, you had acoustic, and you would think like if you just looked at the band, you would be so confused. You're like, how does this go together and work? But they do it so well. Like it makes sense.
Yeah.
When I saw like the acoustic there, and then that Orpheus was playing electric, and you don't see the drummer, but there's drums, and you have strings, and the piano who's also conducting, and I was just like, what?
Well, it's also really cool
And
that you
it
have
still
that.
came all
Like,
together.
that's a good point. That you
And
have.
that's where it cut off. But we were having a lovely discussion. Not that I remember all of it. It just can't be replicated.
It can't. It was for our ears only.
So
sorry.
I'm
but,
so sorry, everybody. I think the point, and if we repeat ourselves again, I'm sorry, but it was that all these different elements, whether it was acoustic, electric, classical strings, piano, drums, and it was all a cohesive experience. And if we already talked about Phantom of the Opera, I'm so sorry.
Sorry, you're gonna hear it again.
You're gonna hear it again, but that's a very different world and
Very structured.
space.
Very, you have
opera singing.
and you have just every single instrumentation is exactly where it should be. Every single show. Not to say that it's not interpreted differently with different actors and actresses, but it's just that with Hadestown, it's still structured, but it comes across as less structured,
Right, like
because
just
it's a
freeform.
story and it's freeform and it's a lot more just relaxed and laid back, I think, with the instrumentation. Whereas when you go see Phantom of the Opera or you go see, I don't know, most other musicals, I would say, it's just a lot more rigid because that's the nature of the story as well, so.
And if we said other points after that,
We don't remember.
we don't remember, but hopefully you got at least something out of that. We could talk about it forever, but we won't bore you with all of that. And we hope you enjoyed this episode that I didn't imagine 2 weeks ago I would be doing it
I
until I
know.
tagged along. So it's
Yeah.
what an amazing experience. You should definitely watch Hadestown. Listen to the album. Let us know your thoughts. Leave a review on iTunes about how amazing we are. You can bother Gabby about sending emails.
Yeah, I've tried to keep up with those.
I've been
but
on my
some
YouTube
weeks-
game. You can see our ugly faces.
Yeah, you can watch us if you want.
And we'll be back next week with our usual programming. If it's usual, I don't know about that.
Hopefully.
And we even have a binge episode coming up. That's what I had also
Because
said.
we don't talk about TV and movies
And,
enough.
I need to get on my Squid Game. So we can
Yes.
include that in discussion. And if you guys are watching anything, reading anything that you would want to hear our thoughts on, or just for us to read it too, please.
Yeah.
Send it our way.
Send it our way and let us know. We will watch it, read it, review it, whether you want us to or not.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
And we'll see you next week with better audio, better video, better lives.
Hopefully.
The wind when we have wind here, it knocks out the power.
Yep.
So we figured it out. And we'll just go back to our regular recording space
Yes.
next week because it's just really good. But yes, thank you for bearing with us with this great production we got going on. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.